a pity that Mr. Sanjay Kumar couldn't be here. He's unfortunately unwell. So I've been asked to give this talk. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. You know, it's fantastic to see the momentum that foundational literacy and numeracy is getting across the country. And I think all credit goes to so many non-profits who've been working on FLN for years. I mean, I think really the movement started 2, 3, 4 decades ago when I think India prioritized massification of education, focused on primary education, and I think the way was shown by the government but also non-profits in showing that it's possible to not only get children to school but also to get them to read with meaning, master, foundational numeracy, so that they could move much further. And many of those non-profits we work with as partners. Pratham has done incredible work. Dheer is here. I saw him at Learning and Language Foundation. I saw Saurav, who's at Room to Read. Many of these organizations. Amitav is here, who's worked closely with us. Many others as well. So I think there's so many folks across the country who, even before this momentum built up, had been doing this work and had actually developed a playbook for how foundational literacy and numeracy could be improved in our schools. And we could actually be confident that we would see improvement in learning outcomes when this program would be taken to scale. I think we were blessed that when the government constituted this committee to work on the new education policy, which is a policy that came after 34 years. So it's very important policy because these don't come very often. It really is a policy that will stay with us for the next 20 years. Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who chaired the committee, I think the committee members did a fabulous job. They listened to lots of people, and I think they read a lot and understood very clearly that the foundational years were critical. So I think all of us were delighted when we saw the final version of the policy that was blessed by the cabinet, which clearly states that this is the most important, the single most highest priority in school education is FLN, and we cannot progress any further. None of the other policies will make sense unless we achieve proficiency in reading, writing and arithmetic in 5 years. And as you all know, subsequent to that, the Honorable Prime Minister launched a mission, NIPUN Bharat, which really was taking forward from the NEP to make this a huge priority across the country. Even before NIPUN Bharat came into being and even before the NEP was finalized, the few state governments had already launched missions. So big credit to them because they had already started the work. States like Haryana, UP had already started Mission Prerna, Ankur mission in Madhya Pradesh. A couple of the states in the south also were taking FLN more seriously. So there were already some signs that, I think everybody understood that FLN is really important. Some of the chief ministers, wanted to make it a priority. But I think the real momentum came when this became a national effort through NIPUN Bharat. Of course, this happened, the NEP and NIPUN Bharat's launch, during the time period of COVID, which was a terrible time as far as, big learning loss for children, schools were closed, etc. But I think it was very clear that once schools were going to reopen, this mission would come into full force and that we'd get a full 5-year runway ahead. So this is an important moment because as you can see from the various states and the videos, the excitement that there is around NIPUN Bharat and the fact that FLN has become a term that even politicians understand today in India. So I think it's a big change. This mission's only just started, so I think whilst there's a lot of excitement, all of us need to ensure, all of us are believers in education, all of us want our children to succeed. I think all of us collectively need to ensure that this momentum is sustained for the next 4 years, and that we all work together to build a movement here to ensure that learning outcomes truly improve by the end of this mission in the next 4 years. I think the early signs are good, but it's still very early days, and I don't think anybody should declare any victory of any sort, because right now we're just playing catch up from the learning loss during COVID. Apart from this, I think NCERT and the ministry also embarked on a momentous study to really understand early literacy and also develop some benchmarks. And so there was this study that was done. I think about 86,000 children were covered across 1,000 schools. And thanks to that study, where 20 languages were covered, we now have a sort of benchmark for oral reading fluency across these 20 languages. And so it was a great, momentous piece of work that was done last year. And as the mission was getting started, this became a very important document to help with the mission and with state governments in particular. CSF is now working in 12 states. Our core objective is really to support the NIPUN Bharat Mission. We see that, many of the elements that these NGOs had developed around FLN and the ministry, what it talks about in its own guidelines, the fact that we need to define goals clearly, we need to have sharp learning competencies, these goals need to be communicated through the system. All of that has really been adopted by state governments. The guidelines from the ministry also talk about a more sort of structured pedagogy. I think it's wonderful to see how SCRTs at the state level have really changed a lot of the teaching learning material during this COVID period, coming into the first year, a whole new set of teaching learning materials. It's fantastic that the ministry made available almost 13,000 crore across 5 years for this mission, largely for TLM. And for those of you who are from the states or work with the states, you know that the PABs that are being sent in, the money is being dispersed, is actually being released. So this money is genuinely available for the teaching learning material, and SCRTs have done a great job in ensuring that we have a print-rich environment in schools, math manipulatives are there, that teachers have more structure, scaffolding, etc. And beyond that, of course, the fact that there is support from the middle management layer as well. So a governance layer, but for coaching and providing feedback to the teachers. And in addition, reviews at the block level, district level. So I think the elements that were laid out by the ministry in their guidelines, those elements at least we see that state governments are taking very seriously, whether it's a BJP state, non-BJP state, whether they call it NIPUN UP or they call it by some other name in their state, irregardless, the energy is there, the momentum is there, and the core elements of the program are being deployed. Of course, there are varying degrees. I think some states, the beauty is that some states will do a good job in some areas, some will do a good job in other areas. There's a great learning opportunity among states or between states because I think there is best practice everywhere. And part of our job outside government, many of us, is to help codify some of this good practice, capture it, spread it, etc. Whether it's in video form, written form, framework form, whatever it may be. Because we really have to make sure that the second year of this mission, which is the next academic year, is a much better year in terms of actual adoption of these new tools, a new way of teaching by teachers, and a much greater understanding by the community as well. I think so far this mission has rolled out, the parental engagement has not been as much as it could have been. And I think one of the next stages or next phases of this NIPUN Bharat mission has to be, how do we engage communities, how do we engage parents more actively? And I think states are thinking about that as we go forward. I also do want to point out that NEP places a lot of emphasis on ECE as well. We have seen that a number of states have consolidated or co-located their Anganwadis with schools. I think that's a good move. In fact, CSF is working in 2 states, UP and Telangana, and doing some pilots. And I think if those pilots are successful, we'll look to work at the state level as well, in terms of helping those state governments in particular. But in addition to ECE, I think there is a strong focus in NEP also on Balvatika, on the pre-primary stage. And NEP, as you know, looks at these 5 years as a continuum. So, but focusing at least on age 5, because most states are now saying that the entry into class 1 needs to be at age 6. And therefore, class 5 is this Balvatika in schools. The ministry does have a budget. I think at last count, I remember it was about 767 or 776 crore, something like that, about 750, 800 crore. A lot of states are taking advantage of this, but it's being spread too thin. I think one of the things that we need to do is, of course, this budget needs to increase, but also in the Balvatika, we need a dedicated teacher to be put in, and this pre-primary section actually be put to, even if not across the state, in a subset of schools in the state. So we've been speaking, in fact, I've been talking with Sanjay ji, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, about how the ministry could actually work to sharpen this Balvatika, because it's a great initiative to make sure that a few states at least get reasonable coverage of the Balvatika grade. And then finally, we also do a little bit of work on education technology, EdTech. I think we heard in the previous session about EdTech. I think really the objective is to make sure that whilst during COVID, I think a lot of state governments took advantage of EdTech, but we all know the issues and the problems with EdTech, is to make, I think a lot of states, what we see now is at least they're aligning it more with the curriculum, and that's a positive. That it's not being used as a standalone, that it's really additive, whether it's used by the teacher, used by the middle management, used by parents, etc. So I'll just close by saying that, look, this is just a wonderful opportunity in India to have a chance of a lifetime, really, where there's a mission underway. There's so many talented people working in different organizations to support government, state governments taking this very seriously. And this first year, I think, has been a reasonably successful year, given how long it takes to change any system. And our hope is that the second year will see even more momentum, and at the end of 5 years, at least I am very confident that we will definitely see change, which hasn't happened in a long period of time, in learning outcomes at the foundational level. So thank you for being here, and thank you for partnering with CSF in whichever form you choose to partner with us. Bye-bye. Thanks.